It's closing day, finally. My name is Sean Larson, real estate broker, and so many people are happy when it's time for closing. That means all the contingencies, all of the hurdles, negotiations, all of that is done. But what exactly happens on closing day? A lot of people don't know. Or, if it's a first-time home buyer or if it's been a long time since they've done a closing, it varies per region how they go. So let's talk about some of those aspects. In some regions, people might close at the exact same place. Sometimes they might be at the exact same table closing the deal, signing the paperwork and things like that. But in a lot of regions, people don't do that. They are closing at separate places. They might use a separate title company. They might use a law firm. And that is the facility that handles their part of the paperwork. So for instance, if you're a buyer, you might specify you want to close at a specific title company. You want them to handle your paperwork. Whereas the seller might have their preference to use another title company or another attorney. And so they're handling their paperwork at a different location. That also means that everybody might be closing at a different time because they specified a time that works well for them. And one thing to remember, and we go over this in some other videos as well, closing is a process. Closing isn't just when you signed your part of the paperwork, and that's very important when it comes to property possession. We go over that in another video too, because that's a pretty big topic. So closing is when the seller signs all their paperwork, when the buyer signs all their paperwork, when the funds have been dispersed. So closing is a process. Keep that in mind. It's just not when you sign your part. It's that complete process. So if you figure people might be closing and signing at different times, closing might actually last the whole day. It's just not your 10 o'clock appointment where you might be signing. Another option too, other than signing in person, as remote as people are, they might be selling property from a distance nowadays. You can often do what is called an away closing, which means you don't have to be present where the closing or where the property is. And the way that is usually handled, it can go a couple ways. If lending is involved, your closing documents usually are still going to require what's called a wet signature, which means somebody actually needs to put pen to paper. So if you figure you want to close on, let's say, June 1st, you're going to close on June 1st. Your paperwork is going to need to be signed and back to the title company by June 1st. And so if you're in another state, what they usually do is they send the documents to your location. You will usually meet with a notary, sign the documents, and express those back so they are on site for the actual closing date. So that's very important that timeline is kept to make sure everybody is operating according to the contract. Okay, if it's not involving lending, quite often you can now do an electronic or digital signature remotely and do the same thing, and it won't involve the notary type process or the wet signature on paper. But a lot of times what it's done in person at different title companies. Closing involves that whole process. So you do want to keep that in mind because that rolls over to possession of property usually. This, again, is in another video as well, but be sure you know the document of when possession of the property occurs. Usually it's after closing and funding, which is part of closing. So be careful on that nobody starts arranging moving trucks too early before possession actually takes place. So that is just a little bit about what happens on closing day. A lot of people aren't sure what goes on there. They know they're excited because the sale is about to finish. So if I can answer any questions about that, my name again is Sean Larson, real estate broker. If I can help out with anything, reach out and I'll take great care of you. Have a super day.